So, ENTELECHIAAAAAAA just came out for global servers. I hope you're ready with your pulls since she's undoubtedly the most broken Tier 0 character in the game. What? Worst character in the next 6 months? Worse than Executor Alter? Psh, pish posh, I say. Shh. You don't need to listen to all that. All you need is some vamp girl propaganda. How did my pulls go, you ask? I'm glad you asked. But in all seriousness, yes, I do agree that out of all the upcoming 6-star gacha operators, ENTELECHIAAAAAA here is definitely the weakest of the bunch. But not because she herself is weak, it's just that the other operators are just that insane. But I feel as if that notion is pushed a little bit too far to the point where some people think that she's, I don't know, fucking permanent account damage. I love ENTELECHIAAAAAA. She's really fun to play, so if you don't care about all the people saying that she's not worth the pulse and just want to play her anyway, well, you've come to the right place. As always with my operator guide videos, I'll first go over her entire kit, the talents, skills, and module, going over more on the numbers side of things, and for the second part of the video, I'll talk about more of the intricate details about her skills, and of course, quickly going over her synergies and role, and of course, comparing and contrasting ENTELECHIAAAAA with her contemporaries. And of course, I'll talk about how she does in specific content a bit later, but for now, let's quickly go over her kit. I'll try to show that ENTELECHIAAAAA here is so much more than what people are saying, and while not being the best operator of the bunch, and in terms of damage output is even outclassed by Executor Alter, she still has some really cool things that you can do that you can't quite do with any other operator. But without further ado, this is ENTELECHIAAAAA. Okay, so ENTELECHIAAAAA is of course a Reaper Guard. That means true AoE, can't be healed, heals self per attack, the usual. You know, like a PvZ Snapdragon. Unlike the little neurodivergent Gun Angel, both of the vampire's talents focus on sustainability rather than all-out offense. Her first talent, Blood Bank, gives her a max HP steal from enemies that she hits. Sort of a strange ability, basically reducing the enemy's max HP by a flat amount while also increasing her own HP total. Basically, this is one-shot protection. Notably, with enough stacks, she would be able to easily survive the Chapter 10 Londinium Cannon. The same talent also makes her apply an Arts DOT to enemies that she's hitting. It's not really a significant amount of DOT, doing a similar amount of damage as Thorns with 2 stacks of his DOT. But as always with this type of damage, it's always useful when it matters. Her second talent, Second Serving, gives her a second chance at life. The second she goes below 25% HP, she restores a significant portion of her health, giving her a second wind, and gets some physical damage reduction to boot. So the second time she's hit with the same physical attack, it won't hit as hard. If you have her module on, the physical damage reduction does increase a noticeable amount, doubling from 10 to 20%. But the mod isn't really that necessary, so if you're tight on mats, I'd wait for her second one. Moving on to her skills. Her S1, Chasing the Rose Shadow, very cool name, is pretty much identical to La Pluma and Highmore's S1. Well, not identical. It has very slightly higher damage multiplier, but I think it'll be very uncontroversial when I say that this is a never build skill. Some of you might be asking why, thinking that they love La Pluma's S1. Well, that's the problem. La Pluma uses this skill better. Her average DPS is simply just higher. Why, I hear you ask? Well, even though ENTELECHIAAAAA has a higher multiplier, and being a 6-star simply having higher base stats, La Pluma makes up for it with her talent, stacking a lot of ASPD, letting her activate the S1 much faster than ENTELECHIAAAAA ever can. Not to mention, at max ASPD, La Pluma can also get an attack buff. It's small, but it's enough to make up for the base stat difference between the rarities. If you really want to use a lane holding skill like this, La Pluma just does it better. Moving on to Enchiladas S2 Crimson Harvest. This skill is my favorite that she has, and if I'm honest, mostly the entire reason why this video exists in the first place. This skill spawns a spinning scythe around Entelechia and one other melee operator in the stage, always prioritizing the latest deployed. This doesn't get affected by any taunt that your operators have, meaning Muinar won't eat it up, and you can still rest assured that your ambushers will receive the scythe if they are the last deployed operator. This of course is basically a pseudo-global skill, since you can just deploy an operator beside the enemy on the opposite side of the stage and turn on the blender. Each hit of the scythe deals almost double the amount of Entelechia's current attack every half second. In total, this skill can hit up to 48 times in a single skill activation in the span of 12 seconds. That is quite insane. The DPS of this skill being really high because of how fast this skill hits enemies. Now you might be thinking that this skill would fall apart against high defense enemies. And yes, she does hit minimum damage against enemies like the Bell guys from Muse event, the Sarkash Shield guys from chapter 14, and even the Whip guys from chapter 13. But the roster of enemies that she just straight up kills with one skill activation is no joke either. To name a few, she can slaughter the Frog from Muse event in one skill activation, the captains that spawn the basic enemies in Thornalt's event, the assassins from Babel, and Trilby Asher from chapter 12 with a single skill activation. Not to mention, she kills the Hot Pots from your event, the Sudarams from chapter 14, these guys from Tathlife, and these guys from Vina Victoria's event with one scythe. A single scythe kills all these motherfuckers, meaning you can just place a deep color summon in any fast redeploy to completely snipe these guys from across the map. That's such a low investment way to kill extremely high threat enemies, whereas you might want to save your GG or lap alt skill for a more threatening wave. You can just activate this skill with very little repercussion because its cycle is just so incredibly fast. 20 seconds is such a fast skill downtime for what this does. But anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself. I'll talk more about this skill in the third section of this video, where I talk more about the synergies that she has for this skill. For now, let's move on to S3. Entelechia's S3, Clinging Desire, Longing Spirit, is the token, ambitious skill that S3s often are these days. This skill of course increases her attack, increases her range, and doubles her attack speed. This combined with the unique mechanic of the skill is its sustain, since of course more attacks equals more healing for Reaper guards. Basically taking the opposite approach from Executor's S3, where he slows his attack speed but increases his heal per attack. The gimmick of this skill is that she summons up to 3 candles that link to enemies in her range. Any damage done to these candles will be transferred back to the enemy that it's linked to. This basically means that she deals 2 instances of damage to enemies that have the corresponding candle. Not only that, but let's say for example the enemy has too much defense for Entelechia to do some actual damage to it. When she hits the candle, it is guaranteed to take at least 35% of Entelechia's current attack, much like Acid Drop and Project Red's talents. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe this bypasses basically anything. Even Theresa's directional damage reduction, which even reduces elemental and true damage, Entelechia's candle damage can pierce through even that. Now, like I said, the candles can only target up to 3 enemies with the highest HP. As you can see in the clip in the background, she kills 3 of the shield guards in one skill activation, but leaves the other 2 at half HP. So she wouldn't be able to handle an entire horde of enemies that she can't pierce the defense of. Another caveat of the skill is that the candle only inherits 60% of the target's current HP. So the less current HP the enemy has, the less damage the candle can transfer over. This also means that she can't outright kill enemies only using the damage transferred over by the candle. However, combined with a max HP steal from her talent, this skill can make her kill enemies that she really shouldn't be able to, like the Defender guys from chapter 14. Even with all that, I would say that overall, this skill is not that amazing. The guaranteed damage is definitely nice, going beyond 20k guaranteed damage just from the minimum damage from the candle alone, but in terms of raw damage output, Executor Alt has a much easier time hitting through defenses thanks to his much higher damage per hit. And there's much easier ways to get guaranteed damage in year 6 of Arknights. I know that I just said that unlike Elemental and True Damage where she can get through any any form of DR, but that type of enemy damage resistance is rare. Theresa is the only one I can think of that Entelechia has over true damage. Though I must say that the skill cycle is not bad at all. 50 seconds overall rotation with a 30-second downtime is quite flexible, so we can still comfortably use it in any map if you're going in blind. Well, it seems that I've yapped too much about this skill to the point where the parts I was supposed to say for part 2, I've already mentioned. Well, I suppose let's just go ahead and talk about her synergies now. Alright, now let's get the obvious out of the way. Entelechia's S2 was made to be used with fast redeploys. The downtime lines up almost perfectly with the redeployment time of fast redeploy. But of course, some work better than others. The synergy with Yato Alt and Phantom is extremely questionable. Since Yato Alt's skill activation is so fast, she would just stand there and do nothing for the rest of Entelechia's skill duration. And Phantom, well, he pushes enemies away from him using S3. You figure out why that's an anti-synergy. The biggest offender of this would be Kafka. Her S1 slumbers and her S2 has long range. Yep, don't try to pair them up, please. The better synergies are of course Gravel and Texas Alter. Gravel's tankiness gives her the staying power needed to see the skill activation through. And of course, Texas Alter's S3 has an identical range to Entelechia's Spinning Blade. Not to mention, the stun makes it so that enemies will stay in said range. But of course, we cannot talk about the fast redeploy synergy without talking about the GOAT herself, Crown Slayer. Being completely invulnerable during her skill duration, having a stun so she keeps enemies in range, while also having a very similar uptime to Entelechia's Spinning Blade, makes her the perfect candidate to bestow a scythe to, as even if the situation where Texas Alt can't survive with her S3 is rare, it still does pop up. Crown Slayer is guaranteed full uptime for the entire skill duration. It's slightly funny to me that Entelechia's best synergy is an operator people often bully as being terrible, while Entelechia herself is perceived as not really being worth the pulls. But other than fast redeploys, Entelechia of course has more synergies than that. I mentioned it earlier with Deep Color, but realistically all summoners work wonderfully with her S2. Let me correct myself. All summoners that aren't absolute dog water work wonderfully with S2. Even Maggie's drones on S1 and 2, since they can be deployed on melee tiles, you can still bait the scythe activation with those. S1 being a particularly amazing synergy since it of course slows and binds the enemy, keeping them in range of the scythe. Another subclass that has synergies with S2, ambushers. Literally all of them. Even Kirara, who doesn't have a stalling skill, still has the module that reduces enemy movement speed in range. Speaking of range, ambushers of course have a range almost perfectly aligning with the scythe range again. I mean, you name it. The movement speed reduction from Manticore's S1 and Ascalon's Talent, especially S2, Mizuki's and of course Ethan's bind on S2, all of them just work amazingly with the skill. Okay. So that wraps up all the candidates for the scythe deployments. I must say though that both S2 and S3 work amazingly with buffers. Now to some of you that might sound dumb. Of course the DPS character works with buffers. But Entelechia here especially works well with them. For her S3, it's obvious. Higher base attack means that her 35% minimum damage also increases, boosting her baseline, making her deal with much more enemies she really shouldn't be able to. S2, on the other hand, works well with buffers because it's a multiplicative damage scale. You see, compared to someone like her sister in art, Asserter, who additively boosts her attack by a fuck ton already, Entelechia doesn't do that at all, so she would feel the effects of something like Warfarin's attack boost much more. That type of buff will almost double her damage output entirely compared to Sutter, who will only feel around a 20% boost in attack. Even a small attack buff, like the one from Shu's S3, will vastly increase Entelechia's attack, as you can see in the gameplay I have in the background, where she would not be able to damage the high defense enemies at all otherwise. With a small attack boost from Shu, she now kills them in one skill activation. I mentioned a while ago the number of really high threat enemies that Entelechia here can kill in one skill activation. With a single buff, this list becomes much more expansive. Even with a simple setup with Crown Slayer and Warfarin, Entelechia is able to solo DPS both lanes while also completely killing Alistair, being able to kill the Gunlance Elise without Warf, and sniping the Fraud Knights over at Shu's lane with a Warf buff, all the while shredding the boss's HP with the help of Crown Slayer. Now, I won't go over what specific events she does well in or not, but I'll quickly give you a feel for what kind of content she would do well in. In summary, she does well in IS, not named Furnace-Side Fables that is, and very well in the upcoming IS-6 thanks to the hit rate mechanics that one has. She quite easily handles all the upcoming story event content, but she struggles in content where enemy stats become a little ridiculous like in IS-5 and CC. The glaring problem of her survivability is still right there. Despite both her talents being sustained, typically if you're faced with a situation where Executor ult dies, she will probably die in the same situation, unless that situation is tanking the Londinium cannon lamau. But regardless, her role of quickly sniping what typically is the highest threat enemies on the map will prove very useful in any squad. Overall, I would say that Entelechiaaaaaaaaaaaaaa is a balanced operator in an era of Arknights where every single new operator is simply busted. If you think this video is too much Entelechiaaaaaaaaaaaa glazing, and that I'm too biased, well, yeah, I am completely in love with her. I mean, have you seen this vampire lady? I'm sure you've already heard the lobby OST of See You Soon. I mean, I played it in this video, and God, her EP epilogue, you have to listen to it. It's so cool. I mean, picture you're like in a maze-like orchard in an old JRPG. On a more serious note, I think Entelechiaaaaaaaaaaaa is just so much fun. And while yes, I agree that she should be the lowest priority if you're pulling for strong operators, as I always say in all of my guide videos, I simply want to show the players that don't mind all the weaknesses and still want to use these operators regardless. Entelechiaaaaaaaaaa is still a strong operator that can easily get rid of high threat enemies with relative ease. I hope this video helps people get a feel for the types of enemies that she can take care of, whether it's with 2 of the spinning scythes or just 1. Anyway, that's all I have for you in this video. I really hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you next time.